Okay, I approve.
Dylan,
Yes.
Goff,
Yes.
thank you. Gutman,
Yes.
Kramer,
Yes.
McLeod,
Yes.
and Ruger in case you have joined. Rummel, Janet.
Sorry. Yes.
Yep, we'll have a few hiccups today. Thank you. And Preston, yes. So minutes are approved. So now we can move into our business portion of today's meeting. Our primary topic.
Mary Ann is on now. I see her.
Great. Thank you, Jill. Thanks, Mary Ann. So we'll move into our Enroll Indy discussion, and James, I'll let you kick us off there.
Do you want to, did you get Mary Ann's vote on the minutes?
I didn't. Mary Ann, we were just approving the minutes. Would you like to weigh in on whether you approve? And I believe you're on mute. Mary Ann.
Would it be possible for her to confirm via chat if she is having audio issues?
I don't know. Voice vote. Does chat count as voice vote? I honestly don't know the answer to the question.
Mary Ann, are you there?
We don't need her vote on this. Hopefully she can work her audio.
Okay, great. Let's
Just move on.
Let's move on, please. Enroll Indy. So
Okay, this is Mary Ann. Can you hear me?
yes,
Good.
fantastic.
My audio for some reason would not unmute. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Was
thank you. We're just trying to record your vote on the minutes.
that, I'm a yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks. We'll move on.
Thank you so much. I could see you, but I just couldn't. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Mary Ann. All right.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the first, well, the only action item on the agenda, and this relates to Enroll Indy. You all have received a number of documents, and I apologize for some of the scatteredness of them. The request from Earl Phelan came after the board packet had already been sent out, and I still wanted to make sure that he had his voice heard. Without going into too much detail, and I'm not going to rehash the memo or any of the other documents that I have already provided you, I just wanted to give you sort of an overview as to how we got to this place. As you know, Enroll Indy's been around for a while now. Enroll Indy has presented, I think, at least twice to our board in the past, but we have never formally ruled one way or the other on whether or not participation in Enroll Indy is mandatory for our IPS located schools. OEI, it is mandated by OEI and mandated by IPS, as you can see from the memo. And we've sort of come to an inflection point now where the only 5 schools who are not participating out of the 100 plus in Indianapolis are ICSB schools. And I believe that it's time for the board to make a decision one way or the other. Personally, I wrestled with this for a long time. I'm a firm believer in charter school autonomy. ICSB has always been an authorizer that values autonomy. I would say that we're one of the more outcomes-driven authorizers out there in terms of the way that we manage our schools. We don't try to micromanage them. But in thinking about this over the years, I think what finally convinced me is really, and I'm not trying to be sort of sappy here, but it's the reason I got into this business in the first place. And that's that it's really all about what's best for kids, high quality options for kids, choices for kids. And, you know, I went back and looked at ICSB's vision and mission and our guiding principles and realized that all of them are really student centric. You know, our vision is for students to have access to good schools. Our mission is to authorize and hold accountable schools where students have the opportunity to grow. And our very first guiding principle is that when we're performing our duties, we always assess whether our actions further the best interests of students. Hold on for a second.
I may ask board members to go ahead and mute your phones real quick. We're getting some feedback.
Okay. All right, I'll carry on. You know, I think a common misconception is that Enroll-ND was created somehow to benefit the district or created to benefit schools. I think it's true that yes, both the district and individual schools, traditional public and charter, derive benefits from Enroll-ND, certainty and enrollment, data collection, etc. But Enroll-ND was primarily created to benefit families and students and not schools. And sometimes what's best for students and families isn't always what's best for individual schools, at least from their perspective. But it's our primary day-to-day job to hold our schools accountable for how they're serving students. And not only does the data show to me that Enroll-ND is benefiting Indianapolis's most disadvantaged families, giving them access to more equitable choices through a transparent lottery system. More importantly, from our perspective, the data we receive from Enroll-ND allows us to not only fulfill our monitoring and accountability functions, you know, and as you can see from the memo, more detailed reasons why it allows us to fulfill those functions. It also assists us greatly with both applications, because historically, and particularly in Indianapolis, in the last 3 or 4 years, the schools that we've authorized have really struggled with enrollment. And one of the issues has been, we have no idea what their enrollment is. Not only is it self-reported, but there's no way to verify it. And so we've had circumstances with quite a few of the schools that we've authorized over the last 3 years, where we have schools opening with 30 students. And while both of the schools that opened with that low enrollment managed to make it, it was a real struggle. And honestly, as an authorizer, the decisions as to whether or not to let a school open due to a very low enrollment is something that we should take advantage of. And Enroll-ND, the minute a school is authorized, it goes in the system, and we can start seeing data about who's enrolling in that school, and it assists us with that process. So there are just too many reasons in my mind, both the benefit to the parents, the benefit to the students, the benefit to us as an authorizer, for it not to be made mandatory. I mean, there's simply no reason why it shouldn't apply equally to all schools that I can think of. And so that is why I'm bringing this to you today. That is why I am requesting the board to make a decision. And obviously you all have your own opinions, and I would love to hear them. It does not look like we've gotten any speakers from the schools that are currently not participating on the line. I reached out to both Crystal House and Phelan multiple times. What? Is there someone on?
We do have Dr. Sarah Weimer on.
Oh, excellent. Great. So I think I am done with my initial pitch. So what I think again, with the chair's allowance, I think the proper next step would be to allow Dr. Weimer to speak.
Give me just a second. I am.
And I'm going to mute.
And Bart Peterson is on the call as well. So right now I do have unmuted Dr. Sarah Weimer.
Hi there. Thanks.
Briefly, sorry to interrupt, but briefly, I'd just like to say, for the purposes of this meeting, given the virtual, it is a virtual meeting, we are only, I want to just highlight this up front, we intend to only accept comments from those who are directly involved in this discussion. We will not be entertaining public comments during this meeting.
Thank you. And Dr. Weimer, whenever you are ready.
I would like to address our primary concern in that we have a hesitation in joining Enroll-ND primarily because we feel like it lacks some transparency. Insofar as we have a very specific mission to address issues of poverty and to help students who are impoverished. And obviously with recent legislative changes, we are able to preference low-income students as an innovation school and currently have the capacity to preference low-income students at our West campus and Doors campus as a pure ICSB charter school. What we've been talking with Bill about is trying to, if not get access to a wait list, get access to the wait list numbers. We think that it's important, and my board thinks that it's important, that we have transparency in the process and that we are able to call students and families who do meet those preferences, the low income preference, the sibling preference, things of that nature, to be able to backfill any open seats that we have, as opposed to being able to hand select students to fill those seats, or, you know, taking anyone who comes in at that point and they get to essentially jump ahead of any student who wasn't placed with us as their first or second choice. And so that is our board's major concern about equity and transparency in the system. And as I've said, we've engaged with Bill to see if this is possible, that we could get access to those lottery numbers that are on the backside. And at this point, it's my understanding that Enroll-ND isn't able to move on that because they need to take into consideration the larger implications of granting schools access to that information. So I would like to ask the board to hold on making a decision about whether or not schools should be required to participate in Enroll-ND until we can flesh out some of these concerns a little bit more. And we've given Enroll-ND time to think about our concerns and some of the longer term impacts of making those adjustments.
Thank you, Dr. Weimer. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find you. Kim, would you like to hear comments? How would you like to proceed? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think, I don't believe we have anyone representing the Phelan Academies on the line. So I think, you know, I imagine a number of board members may have questions. I think it would be helpful if we could have Enroll-ND address. I'd like to hear them talk a little bit about that waitlist issue and how they're thinking through attacking that in any Assurances they might be able to provide on that piece and then entertain questions from other board members.
Sorry, Dr. Weimer, did you have someone else who wanted to speak as well?
Bart has joined the meeting. I don't know, Bart, if you would like to speak.
No, you've said it well, Sarah. I don't need to speak, but thank you.
Currently unmuted are Dan and Bill from Enroll Indy. That next portion.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great. So we have had a lot of conversations with Dr. Weimer. I think, first of all, my colleague Dan and I wanted to make sure that we were here to answer any questions from a technical perspective that all of you have. There are obviously some policy implications for you as a board that don't relate to Enroll-ND. And one of the things that I have really emphasized in my role since becoming executive director is that we are a governance and policy neutral organization, and we enforce the regulations that the authorizers inform us of. So, and then in turn, we provide authorizers with the information that they request and need in order to support and hold their schools accountable. So, certainly there are some discussions that you all need to have. In terms of the wait list, I have enjoyed the opportunity to work closely with Dr. Weimer as we've discussed this, but what I can also tell you is like the complexity of deciding whether or not you have a wait list in a unified enrollment system is contingent on a lot of factors. And so we look at who is most likely to be impacted. And the fact of the matter is the very families who are coming from low-income backgrounds, who are historically underserved, are the ones who engage in summer transition. One of the reasons I brought Dan was he'll be able to give you kind of historic numbers since he's been with the organization longer. But I would say like what we have offered to Crystal House is something that we've been talking to some of our other schools about, which is helping them ensure that they are recruiting and targeting populations that they most want to serve. It is factually inaccurate. We would allow an individual in, or we would do any kind of targeted enrollment. A person during the summer only shows up on a first come, first serve basis during what we call late enrollment. That is after children have been assigned to schools in 2 rounds, and typically schools are full at the end of those 2 rounds. And so the process that we have has actually improved significantly, and I believe you all received testimonials to that effect. The degree to which schools are able to diversify their population, make sure children are accessing the school with a greater degree of equity, and ensuring that kids from historically underserved populations are tagging into seats at the highest performing schools. I totally understand why for Crystal House this feels scary. I was a school leader from 2005 until last year, school and district leader, so I understand why change is hard in that regard, and we want to continue to partner with them and to think through how we can always be a leader service, but I don't necessarily think that would be a reason for you to delay your vote. The question of wait lists per se has been asked and answered already by a committee that Crystal House was initially a member of, and then chose to withdraw from, but in our formation over 2 years ago. And so we are certainly open to always revising our policies, but currently everyone who participates with us has signed on, and more than 95% of them have done so enthusiastically to the process as is. I don't know if any of you have like specific numbers questions, or if Dan wants to kind of piggyback on if that would be allowed, Nicole. But Dan, certainly if you want to share a historic perspective, I would welcome for you to do that. You're my expert in the room.
And obviously I will defer to our board chair, Kim.
Yeah, that's fine. And then I would really like to allow board members to direct, ask those direct questions.
Dan, I do have you unmuted, so.
Sure. I don't have too much to add on the waitlist side of things. I think I'd really just welcome questions from all of you on what you're specifically interested as a board, and we can tackle those as they come.
All right, give me just one moment to unmute all of our board members. Okay, Kim, all of our board members should be unmuted at this point.
Great. Questions for James or Enroll Indy folks, anyone?
I just need a clarification. There was other data that Dr. Weimer and Crystal House were interested in besides the wait list. Is that correct?
Information, they asked us if we could provide them with a wait list, and that would like basically the lottery numbers for all of their students so that they could essentially, and please, Dr. Weimer, if you want to correct me, I'm being correct. My understanding is we would give them the wait list, we would give them the numbers that all the kids got in the lottery, and then they would create their own internal wait list. What we've offered instead is we can give them contact information for every kid, and we can let them know the student's date of application, name, contact information, and then they can reach out to them and alert them to any seats. The one challenge we would have is we are governed by FERPA laws, and so we need parent permission before we distribute information to schools with whom a child has not been matched. But typically that has not been hard for us to get because most families will say, if I want to go to KIP, please let KIP know I want to go there so I can get their recruitment materials. It would be a pretty small percentage of kids who would decline that option.
Jill, real quick, I'm going to jump in. The one other issue they had related to their ability to prioritize free and reduced lunch kids. This was something that was added to the law, I don't know, a couple of years ago that with the charter authorizer's permission, you could add that as a preference. One of the problems is that it was not, they had to make a change to the law this year, which they did make for Crystal House to add the ability to make it a preference in the Enroll Indy lottery. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong, Bill. So now we have the legal ability to add FRL status to the Enroll Indy lottery preference. The trick, and this is maybe a Dan question, is how that gets implemented technically speaking. So it's not a legal issue. It's not a we're not going to do it issue. It's a how do we make it work issue.
So just, yeah, that's absolutely correct, James. And what we ended up doing was in the hopes that Crystal House would partner with us in some capacity at some point, we've already contracted with the company that writes our programs to make sure that that'll be in place effective next fall. So for the next round of the lottery, it'll be available.
Okay. Thank you.
So I have a couple questions, and I think these are directed at James, just from a process perspective. So in reading your memo, you talk about how this will assist in terms of understanding the enrollment for the students. I had the paragraph and then I flipped down, so I don't have the words exact, but anyway, so my question is, there's a school that they said their first year enrollment is going to be 150 and they get 75 through Enroll the Indy. So do you see using Enroll Indy as a way in which you then counsel a school to say your enrollment is too low for this starting year? maybe we need to take another year and you need to do this and this and this. I mean, help me understand how you might use some of the data as an authorizer from Enroll Indy in terms of engaging with schools.
So are you talking specifically with like new schools who have just applied with us? Where they literally have no enrollment, going into it? Is that what you're
Right.
asking?
I mean, I'm looking at your memo and you're talking about the ability for you to get all of this information. And I assume if you're going to get information, then you're going to act on it.
Right. So obviously, even with Enroll Indy, kids can enroll and then not show up.
Right.
That happens regardless of whether there's a unified enrollment system. What Enroll Indy does that is different than now, under the current system, we get a new school, we then go through our pre-opening process, and we ask them, how's enrollment going? And they tell us, we have X number of kids. Now, that number may be accurate, it may not be accurate. We have zero way of verifying whether or not it's accurate, whether or not those kids even are aware that they're enrolled in the school. We've had that happen before, actually, with one of our schools last year, where they were claiming kids were enrolled in their school that were actually enrolled in a different school in Enroll Indy. So what Enroll Indy does is it doesn't fix the problem, the risk that not enough kids are going to show up on day one. But what it does do is it gives us more insight of the kids who have indicated in some official capacity that they want to enroll in that school, which increases the likelihood that they actually will show up on day one. Nothing's a guarantee, but it assists us. It's just another tool to give us an idea. So if for example, a school has 2 kids in Enroll Indy, and again, I'm going to give you an example. Indy STEAM, which got a late start, I think had 2 kids in the system. And if they have 2 kids in the system by the end of round 2, that's a serious red flag. So that's when you start having questions about maybe postponing opening. I mean, there were other issues with why we postponed their opening. But the point is that, again, nothing is a perfect tool. No kid that enrolls in Enroll Indy is required to go to the school that they said that they were going to go to in Enroll Indy. But it certainly gives us a much better, clearer picture than we used to have.
Okay, so my other question then is if we mandate our schools participate in Enroll Indy, is that the only way I, as a parent or a student, can get into that school is by going through Enroll Indy?
Yes, that's the point of the system, is that all recruiting, marketing, all of the things that schools do now remains exactly the same. School fairs, advertisements, marketing, whatever they want to do. The only difference is if they say, I want to come to your school, they have to do it through Enroll Indy. It's just an enrollment mechanism. And as I said in, I think, one of the documents I sent you, there's absolutely no requirement that Enroll Indy as an entity be involved at all. You can do it on the phone, on the computer, on an iPad. You could go to a school such as Phelan or Crystal House. They could have a computer set up in their office, and someone walks in and says, I want to come to Crystal House. And the Crystal House employee can sit them down and help them sign up for Crystal House on the Enroll Indy computer. So there's no, some of the preconceived or some of the misconceptions were that this was a process that was driving everybody to the IPS building to enroll in Enroll Indy. There's absolutely no reason to go to the IPS building. There's absolutely no reason to talk to Dan or Bill or any of the Enroll Indy folks. They're there to assist, but there's no reason that you have to talk to them. they could completely go through the enrollment process by walking into one of our schools, taking a tour, saying they want to go, and then sitting down on a computer and enrolling in through the enrolling mechanism right then and there.
Okay.
I don't know if any other board members have been through this with your own kids, but I have 2 students who've gone through the Enroll Indy process, and I still did. I did the, dozen tours and figured out, how I wanted to do it first. I ended up filling out the enrollment at home, but at many schools, there were places if you wanted to sit down and figure it out, there was a staff member there to help you do it, and it didn't feel like it was any different than if you were sitting down to specifically enroll in that school, just that you wouldn't necessarily know that day whether or not which choice you got. So
my last question then is, okay, so I assume, James, that as you've implied in your memo, that there will be data that comes to you and hopefully to us as the board that will explain what's going on. Our school's creaming, our school's, counseling students out. Are some of the things that charter schools have been, or that public schools have laid on charter schools in terms of criticisms, that will be data that you will have available, that you will bring to us, that we can discuss, that we can, and then as I said, okay, great, you get data, then what are the repercussions or potential repercussions for a school? And I assume that's something else that we talk about once you gather this.
So yes, and I think Bill sort of alluded to this. Enroll Indy is a neutral organization. Their only purpose is to run the system. They do not police the system. Their responsibility is not compliance. But what Enroll Indy does do is we can get you a detailed list of all the data that they provide. They can give us weekly reports. They can give us on-demand reports of enrollment. The way that one of the ways, and without getting too technical, it makes it far more difficult for a school to cream, for example, because the lottery is what the lottery is. Those schools, the only real way right now, and this is something that we've discussed internally, and again, I'm just being honest, to sort of game the system is to set artificially low lottery targets. And that's a problem. And we'll fully admit that that's a problem. But you know what? That's a problem that is the authorizer's responsibility. And as an authorizer, I have no idea what's happening with a school maybe doing that unless Enroll Indy tells me. So what would happen is Bill or Dan would say, historically, this school, is at 150 students. They're setting a target at 80. Not statistically in line with where they should be setting their target in order to fill their school up. In an ideal world, all of these schools would be full after round 2, because that means it's purely equitable. The system takes the preferences, all those preferences that Dr. Weimer was talking about earlier, all those preferences are taken into account, and then if there's a tie, the lottery number kicks in. And so if we, as authorizers, ultimately are responsible for policing this behavior that's maybe behavior that's not following the policies of Enroll Indy. And I've made it very clear that and we've had internal discussions about this, when I see someone gaming the system, and I'm going to give you another example, a specific example. One of our schools was abusing the system last year. They were participating, but then they were also enrolling on their own, and that violates the terms of the MOU. When I found out that that was happening, I immediately reached out to them, told them that they were not to do that anymore, and that that was a material violation of the charter. At this point, it wasn't even in the charter. They had chosen to participate, but it was a material violation because they were violating the terms of their MOU with Enroll Indy. And in my mind, that's violating a contract. You're violating a contract. You entered into a contract. I didn't force you to do it. You did it, and now you're gaming the system. And I essentially told them that if they didn't stop, that it could conceivably get their charter pulled. And so I never would have known that this was happening if I didn't get information from the Enroll Indy staff who noticed that there were discrepancies. And so, you know, in the end, it is the authorizer, and that would be us and the mayor's office. It is our responsibility. It is the district's responsibility to enforce violations of the system. It certainly makes it a lot easier with, and I think I gave 2 examples in the memo as well, of anecdotal information. So it's not just, you know, we're looking at the raw data and we're noticing, your demographics are a little weird. Why do you only have 4% special education students? That doesn't track in a district where we have a 17% average. Something must be going on, which currently is very difficult for us to figure out. But also, when you have a school, call Enroll Indy and say, hey, you know what, I know we're full, but you know, I have this buddy who wants to get his kid in the school, so can you just get him in the school? Well, that again violates this sort of the policy underlying the system. And so what happens is the authorizer is notified, and the authorizer is the one who takes care of the problem, because the authorizer is the ultimate sort of compliance mechanism. And so I guess to answer your question, you know, there is a lot of information that we currently do not have that we would have with all of our schools if they all participated, that would enable us to ensure that that kind of stuff is not happening.
Thank you.
James?
Nicole?
It looks like we have both Dr. Calvin and Mary Ann speaking. So Kim, who would you?
Dr. Calvin can go. I'll wait.
Hello, Dr. Calvin. It is great to see you.
Nice seeing you. When I opened the screen and saw you, I thought I was on the wrong conference. You're quite handsome, so make sure your wife knows that. I don't know if you want to.
Thank you. I think that's the result of not being able to groom for a month.
Oh, well, you look great with that. Listen, the question that I have is that, as you know, I'm always interested in data, but when we start mandating, I'm always interested in knowing what the director that's paid for that opinion. And am I correct in interpreting all of this that yes, there are some policies and numbers and data that we're going to receive, but as the director, you are recommending that we support Enroll Indy? Am I clear on that? And it's not the board making the decision.
So, well, I mean, ultimately it is the board making the decision. You all, I advise you all make the decision. But what I will say is, and when I initially started this process, I was just going to make an objective memo and let you all decide. But honestly, as I felt uncomfortable doing that as an executive director. I am recommending, as the executive director, that we mandate participation.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Okay.
That's all of my questions.
Oh, okay. Mary Ann?
Yes, thank you. And you answered a lot of my questions. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. You answered a lot of my questions earlier this week, which was very helpful. I think this process has been really good and very helpful and informative. Some just nuts and bolts procedure questions. My question would be, as I understand, The proposal is to require this for all new charters and then the rest of the schools at the point at which their charter is renewed. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then it would apply only to ICSB charter schools who are physically located within IPS boundaries and no others. Is that correct?
Yes, it's the area that EI serves, which is currently within IPS boundaries.
Right. And so GEO would not be included because they're in Warren Township.
Indy only serve those that are located within IPS boundaries.
Bill wants to answer it.
I mean, James, you certainly can answer it. I just didn't know if.
No, go ahead.
So we partner with all IPS schools, and we partner with all charter schools that essentially fall within Marion County. So that does include schools like GEO. GEO has actually been a very enthusiastic participant. They signed up right away. They sought us out, which was really cool. Like James made an introduction. They're like, "Can we meet tomorrow?" So in Pike Township, you have automatic entry into that school. Here's the person you contact to go, and this is the address of that school. If you'd like to exercise a charter school choice, we're happy to work with you. And then, parents make that call one way or another. But that would be essentially how that works. Does that answer the question?
And I would real quick add, that's not inconsistent with the fact that we basically have open enrollment. I mean, kids are crossing district boundaries all the time.
Right, but we wouldn't require it of any school that was located outside of IPS boundaries. It
No.
would only apply to those located within the system.
Okay. So in other words, GEO has proactively said they would like to do this. We're
Yes.
great with that, but
Yes.
we're not requiring it
Yeah,
because
no,
we're in Warren
yes.
Township.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We're not, it's a dangerous row to hoe to start to like reach out to the townships and say, well, if you serve one IPS kid, then you have to participate. No, these are only, the mandate is for those schools located within IPS boundaries. If somebody like GEO wants to participate, they can choose to. Yes, correct.
Good.
That's a good clarification.
And then my other question is, does this have, or I have a couple more, does this have any effect on enrollment going on right now for the fall for any school?
The non-participating schools, no.
Okay, so it really is perspective. They're already in the middle of their enrollment. The second round of Enroll Indy is almost over. They've got a year to prepare for this.
Yeah, well, more actually, because if say you are, and I can't remember when Crystal House's charter contracts were signed, but if
Not until the renewal.
yeah, so if they chose not to participate until the renewal or chose to go somewhere else, they would not be mandated to participate until they either decided to renew with us or left. And the same goes with Phelan. I believe their renewals are staggered. I'm not going to mandate, I'm not sure legally we can mandate that they participate. Well, maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to mandate a school participate when it's not part of a contract. So it's either, as I said, it's either going to be in the renewal contract as a condition of renewal, or it's going to be new schools in new contracts where they are making the decision as part of signing the contract.
And Crystal House will be participating for the fall anyway, everywhere except for their west location. Is that right?
It is my understanding that the Innovation Network Agreement with IPS, the Innovation charter participates in the innovation network agreements with IPS require participation. I will let Dr. Weimer address that because I think that there might be some confusion on the issue on their part.
Yeah, our lottery enrollment window had already opened. Our application window under our current charter had already opened by the time we had signed the innovation agreement. So at this point, we are not participating in Enroll Indy in any of our schools. And the only one that would be required going forward then would be our Academy South location.
So for the students who will be coming to Manual next year, is recruitment for that school happening through Enroll Indy or not?
Yes, so the Manual program, which is IPS students, so it's the IPS Innovation Agreement, those are not, they're Crystal House staff and not Crystal House students. Those students are going through Enroll Indy.
So the teach out students, not the Crystal House High School that's coming over.
Correct.
So we have two different kinds of enrollment going on in the same building school. I did not know that.
The physical move of the Academy students into the Manual building has been held off for a year. So there aren't two different programs going on in that building next year.
So there's only one program going on in the building, not two?
Correct. For the upcoming school year.
Okay, so it's a little bit easier to divide those two out then. Okay, thank you. Thank you. And then, James, hopefully my last question is then specifically exactly which current schools would this affect? If we vote to require this, which existing ICSB schools will it affect? At which locations?
So the current non-participating chartered ICSB schools are Crystal House West, Crystal House South, based on, what we just talked about. GVPLA, the original Phelan Academy on Illinois, and then the JRPLA middle school and the high school, which we just recently split, I think at our last meeting, and then Vanguard would be the last one in Hallville. Those are the schools that are currently not participating.
Has Vanguard expressed an opinion at all or commented? I know they were struggling on enrollment, it looked like.
Well, let's just say that we were considering mandating them to participate as part of a corrective action plan anyway, purely because of the enrollment problems that they were having.
Thank you. That's all very helpful.
Questions? Don't think so. If that's the end of discussion amongst board members, and I would entertain a motion to approve staff's recommendation that we require Enroll Indy.
This is Virginia Calvin, and I'd like to make that motion that we honor and accept the recommendation coming from the staff.
Michelle, I'll second.
Great. Dr. Calvin, roll call. Dylan.
I'm sorry, did I hear you? Yes, I vote yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Dylan?
Kim, I am not seeing her in the screen. 1 second.
Lose her.
Yeah. Are we able to come back to her?
Goff?
Yes.
Gutman?
Yes.
Kramer? McLeod?
Yes.
Ruger?
Yes.
Rummel?
Yes.
Preston's a yes, and one more time, Dylan?
She is back. It looks like her audio is, I got a little triangle from her, so I did see her join back in.
Okay, we'll give one more moment.
I just saw her video. Leslie, are you able to hear us? Yeah, it looks like maybe her video isn't doing too great.
Yeah. Well, this is a new one.
I'm going to try and unmute her one more time.
Okay.
And it keeps freezing up. Let's see here.
So we do have more topics. I mean, we can always come back and get her vote if she does manage to make it back on.
Yes, it does look like she has dropped from the meeting at this point. So
Okay.
you might need to join back in. Okay.
James, can I record 8 yes votes? And then if Leslie's able to rejoin, we can capture her vote then.
Yep, sorry, that sounds right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Then James, would you like to jump into the staff updates? And then if we see Leslie join, we'll circle back with her.
Yes, so COVID-19, obviously a lot has changed since our last board meeting. I'm not going to rehash everything that has happened because there's been like 47 executive orders issued by the governor. However, I do want to give you a quick sort of background as to how we got from there to here for schools. The state of emergency was declared March 6th. First confirmed case, after the first confirmed case, first death was March 16th. All schools, public and private, were ordered closed until May 1 on March 19th. On April 2nd, Governor Holcomb issued Executive Order 2016, which mandated all schools to provide instruction via remote learning, and I'm quoting here, for the remainder of the school year. They must provide instruction for either 160 instructional days or at least 20 additional remote instructional days. By April 17th, all K-12 schools, again, including traditional public, charter public, and eligible schools, were required to submit for review and approval by IDOE what was called a continuous learning plan, which detailed how the school would meet the requirements of Executive Order 2016. So authorizers, so this is how we got to that point, right? So now we're in early April. This is, the governor has said, okay, you guys have 2 weeks to put this continuous learning plan together. No one knew what it was. DOE, and to DOE's credit, they issued guidance very quickly, but it was very much a last minute, wow, you only have 2 weeks to figure this out. Authorizers, including myself, Patrick, Lindsay, and Jamie at Ball State, immediately got together and said, you know what, this is a mess. And nobody knows what's going to happen, and nobody knows what's going on. There are webinars and Zoom meetings and WebExes and all over the place, and everyone's offering different advice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And honestly, our schools are overwhelmed. Most schools, if not all schools in the state, and I think I would include districts in this that aren't virtual schools, prepare 2, 3, 4 day remote learning plans, right? For snow days or things like that. Nobody prepares a 25-day, 30-day remote learning plan. So we immediately put together both a Facebook page, the Indiana Charter School Community page, which currently has 113 members, so that charter school leaders could host discussions, share links and other info. We put together a box content management website, which is, I guess, similar to Dropbox, to share documents, including curriculum, information about distance learning, socio-emotional learning, operations, governance, legal, financial information, and other resources, sort of a one-stop shop where we could sort of try to curate some of the vast amounts of information we were getting to sort of try to simplify what our schools were trying to deal with from the varying sources they were hearing information from. Ball State also started weekly webinars. The initial ones were hosted by Connections Academy, which was a perfect choice since Connections Academy does virtual learning. They were very well attended, let's just say. We've moved on to, I think we've had a webinar every week since probably mid-April, early April, with different topics. At the same time, ICSB was doing the same thing, gathering information, trying to distill it down, trying to make sure that the dates weren't being missed, whether they be for financial support, whether they be for documents that had to be filed, et cetera, et cetera. I must have sent 15 emails to all of our school leaders in the first week and a week and a half. I'm sure they were completely annoyed with me. As of today, that's a lie. Well, I guess as of today, but by April 24th, all ICSB schools had submitted their CLPs and had them approved. One of the things I did in the middle, and I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let Bridget do most of the specific talking, but I wanted to bring this up. I spent several days during that period reviewing about 60 school district websites, and I read about somewhere between 25 and 30 continuous learning plans. I just wanted to see what districts were doing, right? And these were districts all over the state. These are huge districts, small rural districts, urban districts. I wanted to get a sense as to what these districts were doing to inform our sort of technical assistance and analysis of our own schools. And quite frankly, it was a hodgepodge. It was all over the place. Some were multi-paragraph, multi-paged, very detailed documents. Others were like 3 pages long and had almost no information. Some general information about the plans, and this is comparing our CLPs to the district CLPs. So the average number of days per week for our schools is 4.7. The district average is 3.2. The average total number of days served by our schools is 182. The district average, it's really hard to say, but it's definitely lower than 180. The average last day of school for our charter schools is May 27th, the district average being May 15th. Almost all schools are using some form of learning management system. And by that, I mean something like Google Classroom, which is by far the #1 used by our charter schools, but also by the districts that I looked at. Our Excel centers are using something called Odysseyware, which is specific to those schools. Some of our other schools are using things like Class Dojo, Blackboard, PowerSchool. A lot of districts were using Canvas. Not many of our schools were. I'm not entirely sure why. It may have something to do with cost. For communication, almost all of our charters are using email, and the vast majority of them are using Zoom in some fashion. They're also communicating with students and teachers via the phone. Some have created their own sites. And a lot of them are using social media. So as a general analysis, I think and as much information as you can get from the CLPs, and Bridget's going to explain a little bit more by why the continuous learning plans may not be the best measure of what our schools are actually doing. Our schools are very comparable to what most districts are doing. Now, obviously, there are school districts that are one-to-one. A lot of school districts have a lot more resources than our charter schools do, and so their plans are going to look different. But most, if not all districts, and most, if not all charter schools are offering packet options as well. Not just for folks who may or may not have access to the internet, but also folks who just aren't comfortable with the technology. The way that they do the packets are different. Some give a week's worth of work and then expect them to turn it in at the end of the week. Some it's more on a day-to-day type basis in terms of how those packets are turned in. You know, special education is obviously one of the biggest issues here, and honestly, schools are still figuring it out. The federal guidance, the USDE guidance on that was to be blunt, crap. They didn't really give much in the way of guidance as to what schools should be doing in terms of assisting their special education students. The majority of schools, districts and charters are just trying to make their special education and other support staff specifically available by phone, email, social media on an as needed basis. Some are using other resources, but it's really on a case-by-case basis. The methods for taking attendance, again, very similar for districts and charters. The most common is completing assignments. So you either complete an assignment in Google Classroom or you turn in your packet. Some schools require students to answer a daily question. Some schools, a few district schools actually were counting students present unless the parent reported the student is absent. One other thing that I noticed that was fairly common among districts, and I'll let Bridget address this more specifically about charters, is that there were more than, and it's hard to count because I didn't look at all of them, quite a few of them were taking the position that any assignments completed during this 20-day period could only help your grade, that they were not going to decrease a student's grade based on anything that happened during this period. And you know, I'll let you all draw your own conclusions about that from a policy perspective. The very last thing I want to talk about, and this will be really quick, was the CARES Act stimulus funding. I still don't think we know what's happening with the government, the governor's sort of discretionary, the governor and DOE's discretionary funding. But the formulaic funding, the one that was based on Title I allocations, all ICSB schools received about $2.3 million total. Crystal House South actually received the highest amount, $500,000, and Gary Middle College received the lowest with $18,000. But the average and the median were pretty much about the same, around $190,000 per school. Now, the great thing about this money is that the feds gave schools very, very wide discretion in what they can do with it. And again, I'm not going to read from the really long list, but you know, in addition to just giving principals and other leaders just the ability to use them for whatever resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools, they can purchase supplies to sanitize, they can plan for and coordinate during long-term closures, they can purchase educational technology, they can even plan and implement activities related to summer learning and supplemental after-school programs, including providing classroom instruction during the summer months and later. So there's a lot of flexibility in how they can use that money. So again, because the ADM was frozen, the state's not taking money away from the schools, and because the schools got this additional stimulus dollars to help them, most of them are in a decent financial position. The ones that were in financial trouble before are still in financial trouble. It's not going to dig them out of any holes. But what it is allowing them to do is to implement their continuous learning plans. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget, who's going to give you just a couple of examples of what our schools are doing specifically, because I think that's far more useful in terms of like, how are these things actually working? So Bridget.
Yes, James, can everyone hear me? Perfect, thanks, Nikki. As James mentioned, continuous learning plans were due April 17th. Many staff members at DOE had a specific rubric, and then those rubrics were then emailed back to all of our schools, and we got copies of those rubrics as well. So all of our schools submitted their CLPs on time, rubrics were returned, all were approved. And rather than highlight those CLPs, because they are all posted on websites, those are a requirement as well. We just wanted to highlight some of the incredible things that our schools are doing.
Real quick, if I can interrupt, I'm sorry, I apologize, but we're going to send you out a document. We've still been sort of compiling that information. We've been in the process of compiling that information because they literally were all approved like Friday. We're going to send you a document that has a list of links to all of the CLPs after the meeting. So, sorry.
Nope, you're good. So with that being said, you can go to each of our schools' websites, see their CLPs. They were all predefined questions by Department of Ed. So with that predefined answer, question and answer, I've been taking the last week and just really touching base with all of our school leaders or other staff members, and then digging into their websites. And it is just so incredible to see them pivot into this e-learning, virtual learning. So I just wanted to give you a quick highlight to a few of our schools and what they have accomplished in such a short time, and some with very limited resources. So one I want to highlight is Allegiant Prep Academy here in Indianapolis, very small K-2 school, limited resources and staff. They created their own web-based learning platform. They do daily videos covering reading, writing, and math. And this aligns to their current instruction that they were already doing in the classroom. They have YouTube videos, and I watched some of their YouTube videos, and you can just tell that it's a mirror of what they were doing in the classroom. So it just keeps it very connected with those K-2 kids. And so I think is just something that continuation of learning and those high expectations, even for their young scholars, I think says a lot for that school in and of itself. One teacher in particular, when I went through her lesson plans, she found a free website for students to access free books, and has gone and hand-selected books for each of her students to read. So they're on those students' reading levels, and they're continuing with their reading through the rest of the school year. Our schools are not ending early. They are finishing their school through the entire year. So that says a lot about all of our schools and continuing to serve the social emotional needs and the academic needs of all of our students across the state of Indiana. They do community circles at Allegiant Prep every day at the end of the day via Zoom, and all of the students log in and they're able to connect with their classmates and their teachers. And so that again is continuity of the day, continuity of learning, and able to stay connected and make sure the social and emotional learning, and I think just checking in. And you know, I don't want to take away from any of the schools that I'm not going to highlight here, or any other charter schools or traditional public schools across the state, because I know everyone had to pivot and do a lot in a very short period of time. But I just, again, wanted to highlight some incredible things that I'm seeing out there across our portfolio. Phelan Learning Academies, they also created their own e-learning platform, and they require their students to log in each day to record attendance. Their lessons are broken down by grade span. So they have K6, 7, 8, and 9, 12. They have safety videos. They have videos on how to use their devices, how to stay safe on the internet. They have daily scholar schedules, so it is broken down. They expect them to be learning every day in a regular schedule. They have core classes, they have specials. They've not given up PE, art, music. They've continued with those areas as well. And they've added links called On Your Own. So they've also continued with some wonderful highlights for virtual field trips. They've done Black History tours. They have college and career highlights for their high school students. And they've just really continued to add to all of their grade span learning the best that they could, given that they're not face-to-face with the demographic challenges that they serve on a day-to-day basis. And then another school that has just done an incredible job of changing the way they do business from brick and mortar to virtual is Steel City in Gary. They have their virtual link right on the main page, and then you dig in, and Katie Curley, their executive director, does a morning message every day. She has a positive message for those students and parents. They have links for attendance, for technology, for parents. They have links for who do I go to for what, and both from a parent perspective and a student perspective. They've created daily schedules, and their attendance has to be completed every day by 9:30. They have resource rooms set up for all of their special education students. So they have continued to support all of their students across all of their special needs area. And they have Google Classrooms set up for all of their classroom teachers, for all of their students, letting anything academically slide. Assignments. And what they're.
And we lost you for a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I may have stepped back too far. But the last thing I wanted to say about Steel City was their Google Classrooms, and specific to all of their daily schedules, their links. It includes their expectations, they're grading their assignments, and so they do expect their students to turn in their work, and it will become part of their academic profile, academic expectation. And they have high school, and their students are expected to continue and make that core 40 requirement. Those are our three big ones. As James indicated, our Excel centers, which are the large part of our portfolio, moved everything to their Odyssey credit recovery so they could continue to earn high school credits as well. And just many, many schools across the state have just really gone above and beyond to continue to serve all of the students in their school, both academically. They continue to provide food service. They continue to do multiple communications, from Zoom to email to text messages, and they require multiple touches, multiple communications with parents, students daily, and must log all of that so no one gets left behind and everyone on the team knows what's happening on daily basis with all of their students. So with that, we also asked for a few celebrations, and so we received a few communications from our schools. They continue to celebrate their students' birthdays. They continue to celebrate when students level up in readings and go above and beyond math levels. They continue to highlight projects, and they just continue to try and do the little things that especially the elementary kids really, really celebrate when they are face to face. And I think that's important as well. And that's happening day to day in all of our schools. And it's great to see that being pushed out through social media and staying connected as well. So those are the things that we've been doing on the back end while we've worked remotely as a team, and continue to stay engaged with our schools and board members and everyone as much as we can as well. And so that's just a little highlight that we wanted to share with you, and we'll continue to stay on top of everything going on. And James continues to send out important updates as they all come through.
And the one other component, which is still in its gestational phases, is how do we monitor this? How do we monitor whether or not our schools are doing what they say they're doing? I've had discussions with other authorizers about this, and let's be honest, everyone is struggling to figure this question out. We can't do site visits. We can't do, I mean, we can do, I guess, Zoom calls and things like that. But the question is, how do we, what is the best that we can do to keep our schools honest for what they're doing? And I'm going to let Bridget talk about this because she's done the lion's share of work in terms of trying to figure out the best way to handle this part of it. But I just want to share that this is an ongoing discussion, not just with internally, but it's an ongoing discussion with us and other authorizers as well.
Yeah, thanks, James. You know, we have talked about internally weekly reports, or how best to make sure that what they have put in their CLPs, that they are following through. And in lieu of state assessments moving forward into 2021 school year, what does that look like? So we need to be able, as an authorizer, and holding our schools accountable from an academic standpoint, as well as the governance and finance, all three pillars of our charter contract. What do we do? And we've had ongoing conversations, as James mentioned, with other authorizers. We've been attending NACSA WebExes weekly and listening to authorizers all across the country. And we're all trying to come up with answers collectively on what is best served for our individual states, our individual situations. We obviously don't want to be burdensome because this is a heavy lift for many schools, but at the same time, we do believe that we do, as an authorizer, need to ensure that what they say they are doing, they are following through, and they are still serving their students, their families, and the community that they have indicated. So we've had ongoing conversations.
Let me just give you one example of something that we've been bandying about. You know, the question is, what do you measure? And you know, she mentioned, Bridget mentioned, like having them do a weekly report. And so one idea was, you have this weekly report, but what do you put on the weekly report? Well, maybe a completion ratio, maybe attendance, maybe you put on student touches. Like, and again, I hate using that word, but how often are you reaching out to your students? How is teacher engagement? How is student engagement? You know, are there, how are you specifically dealing with your ELL or special education populations? And you know, maybe short form answer questions. Some of these are numbers, like how many times did you reach out to your students, et cetera, et cetera. And then follow that up with a call, a weekly call at the end of the week to discuss the report, to have conversations with the school leaders. What is going right? What is going wrong? Why is your attendance at 72%? Why is your completion ratio at 65%? Is there anything we can do that can help you? Are your kids, is this because you're not getting packets returned? Is it because there's no access to the internet? I think a lot of this is trying to figure out what information is useful, but what information is also reportable. And as Bridget said, some of it we can do by just actually like going on PLA's website and going on Allegiant's website and going on the websites and looking at the lessons, which is what we will do, in between these times. But I think what it's really going to boil down to is just having these conversations with school leaders. And yes, to a certain extent, that is self-reported, but under these circumstances, it may be the best that we can do, particularly because again, there's no testing, no one's testing, and we're an outcomes-based authorizer. So how do we determine whether the students are learning the material? This is a shift for us, and we are welcome. I just got off the phone with Jamie Garwood at Ball State this morning because I was like, so you guys have figured this out, right? And she said, no. And so, I totally welcome suggestions and ideas that they might have as well in terms of how to do this. So it's a work in progress. We're going to do our best to ensure that the students are still being served. And, we'll figure it out. I welcome any comments from board members on this, actually. So if anyone wants to chime in, that would be greatly appreciated.
James? Am I on, Nicole?
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm sorry, I just didn't unmute.
Thank you. The dashboard of this seems to always say I'm muted even when I'm not. So, and I have my cross-country runner coming in the side door, so hopefully we won't hear more things going on. This is just such a heartbreaking but also fascinating time to watch schools. I mean, all schools, public, private, charter, everyone. One question I have is enrollment locked right now? I mean, like, I can't imagine someone applying to a school right now. I mean, and I know Enroll Indy, I think, is locked and everything. But in terms of, I guess, the students everywhere I'm most worried about are the ones who may be adrift because they moved to a different city or because they're just struggling. Do we have, I mean, are students actually able to leave a school right now and enroll in their home district? I haven't even asked the districts that question. I just thought of it. But do we know, are there students who are disappearing, and do we even have a way of knowing? I think that might be my huge concern right now, is students who just disappear.
So I will tell you that I think, and I was having a conversation with Bill about this, that there has not been much movement in IPS. As far as like transfers in other areas of the state, until we get DOE's transfer report, I'm not sure we're going to know.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a 20, 30-day window here.
Right.
And so, I think where it's going to show up is in the attendance numbers, right? If we have schools that, are, and quite frankly, some of the way that these schools are determining attendance is not super reliable anyway. So I'm not even sure we're even going to know what the attendance numbers are, but they're likely to drop. Sure. So, but what does that mean, that a kid transferred or a kid just isn't engaged anymore? I think it's going to be really hard to know. I think what's going to be interesting is where everyone ends up next year. Is there going to be a lot of transfer in the interim, in the summer, in the fall? I'm curious as to whether or not there are a lot of kids trying to transfer to Connections, quite frankly, because you figure, hey, if I'm doing virtual, I might as well go to the one virtual school that's been doing it for years. I have no idea. I think, I don't think that they've seen a lot of transfers. I just think everyone is so still trying in process mode that we're just not going to know. I don't know. I worry that we're going to lose a lot of kids in the next 6 months. I really, really worry about that, but I just don't think we're going to know until next year.
And then my other question, kind of in the lines of maybe suggestions, and I don't know if this is possible or not, but is it possible or advisable, maybe is the other question, for staff to just basically drop in on classes since they are virtual, or is that just something not done?
Yeah, so we had talked about that, and one of the issues with that is there's so many different platforms being used that I'm not even sure I would know how to drop in on a Google Classroom, and then or a Canvas classroom or a Class Dojo classroom or a Blackboard, you know. So we've talked about it. One of the things I don't want to do is say, oh, just because your school is easy to drop in on, I'm going to like hyper, you know, monitor you, but not this other school that is only using packets because they don't have the technology. So it's a difficult balance. You know, I think where the sort of middle is kind of what Bridget was saying earlier. Like, you know, if there's a YouTube class that we can jump in on, if there are messages, if they're doing weekly messages, can we drop in on that? You know, there are ways that I think that we can try to do that without, you know, monitoring. We just haven't set up. We'd have to get logins, and it just would be, I think by the time we figured it out, it'd be like summer. But yeah, we definitely have talked about that. And maybe it is possible for some schools. Maybe some schools will say, hey, why don't you jump in on a classroom or two? But I just think it's too hard for us to make that like a requirement for all schools.
No, it couldn't be, I don't think.
No.
Well, and
This is Dylan. I wanted to just chime in, just being that I'm in a school. If your schools border other states or definitely even other counties where people can just move to, you will find that a lot of students will disappear. And there are students who are disappearing or they're going to live with other relatives during this time because they may have more access to technology. I think the most difficult children you will have a handle on are those children who don't have access to technology. And that's been a difficulty for us. And the only advantage that, like for me, that I have is actually going to homes to even see if it's a sign that the family is still present. But we actually have had a lot of things go on while we have been sheltered in place. And you have the cases with domestic violence and other neighborhood issues going on where people have had to get up and leave. So it is a very challenging time for a lot of families in regards to, and for schools to figure out where people are. And a lot of people have changed their addresses and things like that. And then you also have parents who don't understand why they have to be contacted or keep in contact with schools because in their mind, school is canceled, it's over. So you have, there are a lot of layers with this. So I just want to let all of you all just be confident in knowing you're not alone with trying to navigate and figure out what's going to be best for you all in the enrollment process for next school year is going to be difficult too. And a lot of schools are in the process of trying to find out who's returning, but we don't know what we're returning to at this point.
Right. Okay, so I think in the interest of time, and we've had, I just notified that I think Janet and Jill both had to leave. Unless anyone has any more questions about this specific topic, we have two, two really quick, administrative things to talk about, and then we can call it. Actually, one thing real quick, we still need to get Leslie's vote on the Enroll Indy, so I'll let Kim.
Yeah, Leslie, we lost you right in the midst of trying to capture votes on the enroll Indy requirement. So the motion was made to accept staff's recommendation to require schools authorized by us that reside within the boundaries of IPS to participate in enroll Indy.
It's a yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So recorded. So that was a unanimous yes. Thanks, Leslie.
There was no way we were going to be able to do all the things we needed to do, public hearings and capacity interviews and all of that for our applicants. We are going to need to have at least one meeting at some point in like late spring or early summer, maybe even around about the time we were going to have our June meeting, to discuss one action item, and that is the charter activation for Phelan for School 48, because IPS voted to make them an innovation restart with Phelan as the vendor, and that is a fall opening. So we need to make that decision at some point between now and when school starts in the fall. So we will at some point get together and discuss when the best time for a meeting would be in spring or summer. One of the other things that we need to talk about that might be a perfect well, it's been a long day. Opportunity is the effect that all of this has, not only on accountability, but more specifically on renewal, because of the three renewal schools we have that would start in the fall. So we are by no means ready to have this discussion right now. We're just not prepped. We're still dealing with the CLPs and the COVID and all of that. But we're hoping that, by this sort of late spring, early summer time, midsummer time, that we'll be able to have some thoughts about what the likely impact may be on what all this means for accountability. I mean, not only do we have, these lost days, we have hold harmless, we have all of this other stuff going on. And so that's something we're definitely going to need to address before the fall. So those are the two things that we're going to have to talk about sometime in the summer. As far as having reopening some sort of expedited spring application cycle, our cycles take 3 months from start to finish. We're already a month into the cycle that we suspended. I am not sure that it makes sense, other than this activation, which is a by necessity, that it makes sense to try to have an expedited spring cycle. I spoke to at least one of these schools, Excel Center Elkhart, who is fine with that. And I just think that we're going to need to just digest. I mean, we're supposed to, I guess, reopen in 2 days, right? Our state, at least partially. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that's going to look like. Who knows where we're going to be in June. So what I would prefer to do, and at your will, is sort of wait a couple of months, see how things are, and then maybe we can make a decision at this meeting, whenever it is in May or June, about what to do with this sort of lost spring.
I think that's great, James. And I think too, by then, the governor has indicated he'll be making a decision about schools reopening in the fall, probably sometime in mid-May. So having that information will help us plan for 2021 and beyond as well.
I just don't think we have enough info right now to do anything.
Yeah.
So that is all I have, unless someone else has anything else to add.
Well, thank you guys, and thanks Bridget for all of your work trying to sort this out, and James as well, and the rest of the team.
And Nikki for handling all the tech. It was all Nikki.
I told her that when I joined today. It's a daunting task, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments or concerns to address, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I second it.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, stay well.
Thank you.